My friend, let me ask you a question that I think is going to make you uncomfortable. Did you really choose the life you're living right now? Or did you just accept the path that was laid out in front of you? Think about it with me. You wake up every day at the same time, go to work, spend 8 hours doing things that probably don't fulfill you, come home exhausted, pay bills that never stop coming, and on the weekend you try to recover enough energy to repeat it all over again on Monday. And you know what's most frightening? You probably think this is normal, that this is adult life, that everyone lives like this. But what if I told you that you weren't born to live this way? What if I told you that this prison where you're trapped was built brick by brick, year after year, and that it all started in the place your parents believed was the gateway to freedom? The truth is that life isn't fair, my friend. Some are born with every door wide open. Others are born having to tear down walls just to reach the door. That's the birth lottery, and most of us lost it. But here's what nobody tells you. The system doesn't want you to know this. It wants you to believe that everyone starts from the same place, that all you need to do is work hard to win. Because as long as you believe that lie, you keep running on a treadmill, producing, obeying, without questioning why you're doing it. And where did you learn not to question? Where were you taught that your job is to accept orders and execute tasks? It was at school. That place where your parents dropped you off believing they were investing in your future. Today, you're going to discover something that will completely change how you see your own story. The idea here isn't to talk about conspiracy theories or dramatic exaggerations. We're talking about a systematic process, scientifically developed over decades, that transforms curious children into obedient adults. A system so efficient that you don't even realize you've been conditioned. You think you're making choices, but you're actually just following a script that was installed in your head between the ages of 6 and 18. And the most brilliant part of this system? It makes you defend your own prison, put your children in the same machine, and still be grateful for the opportunity. Look, I know this hurts. I know it's more comfortable to believe that you're in control, that your choices are really yours. But my friend, if you were born without privileges, if you're one of those who lost the birth lottery, then you need to wake up to reality. Life isn't going to be fair to you. You're going to have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, to get where others arrive without effort. And you know what the first necessary action is to change this reality? Understanding the game. Realizing how you were programmed to accept a life that doesn't belong to you. Because only when you see the chains can you start to break them. In the next few minutes, we're going to dissect exactly how this happens. From the first day of school to the last day of work in your life. You'll understand why you feel that constant anxiety, why you compete with colleagues instead of collaborating, why your self-esteem depends on external validation, why you accept authority without questioning. And more importantly, you'll start to see alternatives that the system hid from you. But I need to warn you, after you see what I'm going to show you, there's no going back. You won't be able to live on autopilot anymore. So if you want to stay comfortable in the illusion, this isn't the video for you. But if you're ready to wake up, if you want to understand why your life is the way it is and what to do about it, then stay with me until the end. Because what you're going to discover here isn't in any school textbook, in any motivational speech, in any self-help course. This is the raw, naked truth about the system that controls your life. So let's go. There's a moment in every person's life that goes unnoticed, but that defines everything that comes after. It's that first day of school, when the child walks through the school gate with eyes full of curiosity and expectation. Parents wave, emotional, believing they're delivering their children to a place that will prepare them for the world. But the truth that nobody admits out loud is quite different. At that exact moment, the child is entering a sophisticated production line, where their mind will be molded to serve a structure they can't yet comprehend. And the most frightening thing is that everyone calls this education. The architecture already gives away the game from the start. Think about it, dozens of children sitting in perfect rows, all looking in the same direction, receiving the same information at the same pace, evaluated by the same criteria. Doesn't that seem familiar? Of course it does, because that's exactly how a factory works. The system isn't interested in developing independent thinkers or questioners. It needs people who know how to follow instructions, who accept authority without resistance, who fit perfectly into the existing gears. And the most efficient part of this process is that it happens so naturally that not even the teachers themselves realize they're agents of this machine. When a child raises their hand and asks, "Why?" they're exercising the most human impulse that exists, genuine curiosity. But observe what happens over the years. These questions diminish, becoming rarer, until they disappear completely. Each time a teacher responds because I said so, or because it's in the book, or because you need to know it for the test, they're planting a seed of conformity. The subliminal message is clear: your function here isn't to understand deeply, it's to accept what's being said and reproduce it when requested. It's to learn that there's always one right answer, and that answer has already been decided by someone who's above you in the hierarchy. The real curriculum is never written in any official document. It's in the subtext, in the small daily interactions, in how time is controlled, in the way obedience is rewarded and originality is punished. Think about how it works. The child who sits quietly, who copies exactly what's on the board, who submits assignments in the requested format, that child receives praise, gold stars, and high grades. But the one who thinks differently, who questions the method, who proposes creative solutions outside the standard, that one is seen as problematic. The system is training these young minds for an adult world where thinking outside the box will be considered dangerous, where true innovation will be suffocated by bureaucratic processes, where conformity will be the most valuable currency. The discipline imposed at school isn't about learning to organize yourself or develop responsibility. It's about learning to submit your will to the will of an external authority. When a 7-year-old child needs to ask permission to go to the bathroom, it doesn't seem like they're learning good manners. They're learning that even their most basic needs depend on the approval of whoever's in power. When they need to sit for hours doing repetitive tasks that spark no genuine interest, they're not developing focus. They're being trained to accept boring and meaningless work as a natural part of life. This is the deepest conditioning, making the person accept that their life doesn't belong to them, but to the system that controls them. And here's the most brilliant trick of all. The system disguises itself as opportunity. Parents, teachers, all of society repeats the same mantra: study to have a better future. But nobody stops to define what that better future would be. In practice, what they're saying is, obey now to have the privilege of obeying for the rest of your life in exchange for a salary. The school isn't opening doors to freedom. It's manufacturing pieces that fit perfectly into the rat race. And the saddest part is that this child, who entered full of dreams and possibilities, will leave years later thinking it was all their idea, that they chose this path, when in reality they were carefully programmed to be unable to imagine any alternative. Every child is born as a little scientist, artist, and philosopher all at once. They experiment with everything, question the obvious, create absurd solutions to simple problems, see possibilities where adults see only what's already established. A 5-year-old boy can spend an entire afternoon building a castle with cardboard boxes, transforming the living room into an entire kingdom that exists only in his imagination. A girl the same age invents secret languages, draws families with colors that don't exist in reality, tells stories where animals talk and trees walk. This is the purest essence of humanity, the capacity to create, to imagine, to see beyond what's given. But then this child enters school, and something begins to die slowly. The first deaths are subtle, almost imperceptible. The teacher asks for a drawing of the family, and the child paints the father blue because they think it's beautiful, because in their imagination that color represents the father's strength. But the teacher, with all the good intention in the world, corrects it. People aren't blue, dear. Use brown or beige. It seems like just an innocent guidance. After all, the teacher wants to teach the child to represent reality. But what's really happening there is the first lesson that imagination needs to bow to established reality. That there's a right way to do things, and that way has already been decided by others. The next time this child goes to draw, they'll think twice before using that blue. And so, brushstroke by brushstroke, originality is being erased. The system has increasingly sophisticated tools for this creative extermination. Think about standardized activities, those sheets where all children need to arrive at the same result following the same path. Coloring inside the lines, completing sentences with the correct words, solving math problems using exactly the method taught. Even if a child arrives at the right answer through a different path, they often lose points because they didn't follow the established process. Imagine what this does to the mind of a small human being. because the message is devastating. It doesn't matter if you manage to solve the problem creatively. All that matters is whether you obeyed the method. Creativity isn't just discouraged, it's actively punished. Multiple choice tests are perhaps the most perfect representation of this intellectual death. You take an entire universe of thought possibilities and reduce it to 4 or 5 predefined alternatives, where only one is correct. The child learns that for every question there's a right answer that's already been determined, and their function is only to identify it among the available options. Not to create, not to imagine, and not to propose alternatives. Just to choose within what's already been established. This is domestication of thought. And it works so well that when these children become adults, they apply the same pattern in life. They always look for the right answer instead of creating their own solutions. They seek approval instead of originality. They choose between limited options instead of imagining new possibilities. The most passionate teachers are often the most frustrated within this system. They enter the career dreaming of awakening minds, of cultivating unique talents, of helping each child develop their individual potential. But they quickly discover they're trapped in a rigid structure. There are mandatory curricula to fulfill, approval targets to hit, and standardized tests to prepare for. If a teacher tries to go off script, if they try to stimulate real critical thinking or genuine creative projects, they soon face pressure. From the administration, from parents, and from the system. The students need to be prepared for the test. And which test is that? The test of life or the test of the system? Many educators end up becoming reluctant accomplices to a process that goes against everything they believe in, simply because there's no space to do it differently within the machine. The end result of this creative massacre is an entire generation of adults who've lost the capacity to imagine alternatives. People who accept unsatisfying jobs because that's how it works, who don't question unjust social structures because it's always been like this, who can't visualize a life different from the one they're living because they were trained to only choose among the options the system offers. Creativity murdered in childhood is missed throughout adult existence. And the most tragic thing is that these same people, when they have children, put them in the same system, perpetuating the cycle. After all, how could they do it differently if they were conditioned to believe there's only one correct way to educate? But this inability to imagine was carefully constructed, brick by brick, during years of conditioning that taught that dreaming outside the lines is a waste of time. The most dangerous phrase a child hears during their entire school life is apparently the most motivating. If you work hard, you can achieve anything. Teachers repeat this sincerely. Parents whisper it in their children's ears before tests. Motivational speakers build entire careers on top of this promise. It seems inspiring, it seems empowering, and it seems fair. But this phrase carries one of the greatest psychological violences ever committed against developing minds, because it completely ignores that not all children are running the same race. Some start at the starting line, others start 500 meters behind, and some don't even know the race exists. And when these children inevitably arrive at different places, the system points to that beautiful phrase and says the difference was only effort. Imagine 2 children sitting side by side in the same classroom. One of them woke up early, had a complete breakfast, has a quiet room to study at home, parents who can help with homework, access to books, internet, and emotional security. The other woke up hungry because there wasn't enough food at home, shares a small room with 4 people, has parents who work all day and can barely read, lives in a neighborhood where noise and violence are constant. Now the teacher enters the room and gives the same lesson to both, assigns the same homework, and applies the same test. At the end of the year, one has excellent grades and the other barely passes. And the system looks at this result and declares that the first one worked harder. There's no talk about structural inequality, no mention that the conditions were completely different. The narrative is always about individual merit. The best schools are in the wealthiest neighborhoods. This isn't a coincidence. The most qualified teachers gravitate toward institutions that offer better salaries and working conditions, which are precisely in these privileged regions. Equipped laboratories, vast libraries, technology, extracurricular activities, all of this is the privilege of those who were already born with an advantage. Meanwhile, in the peripheries, schools function with precarious infrastructure, overworked teachers, and lack of basic materials. But when it's time for the standardized test, everyone takes the same exam. And guess what happens? Students from rich schools do well, those from poor schools do poorly. And the system uses these results to justify even more inequality, saying it's just rewarding merit. It's a game where the cards have been marked from the start. The cruelty reaches its peak when someone from less privileged classes manages to win despite all the barriers. When this happens, the system highlights this person as proof that meritocracy works. See? They made it, so anyone can. This logic is perverse because it transforms the exception into the rule. If it was necessary to be extraordinary to overcome structural obstacles, that proves exactly that the system isn't fair. A rich child can be mediocre and still succeed. A poor child needs to be exceptional just to reach the same place. And when they don't succeed, the blame falls on them. They didn't work hard enough. Meanwhile, the executive's son who had mediocre grades but got into university because his father knew the dean, he's never questioned about his merit. The system protects the privileged and blames the disadvantaged. This meritocratic narrative doesn't exist by chance. It serves an essential function. It makes people accept inequality as fair. If the rich are rich because they deserved it, and the poor are poor because they didn't work hard, then there's nothing wrong with the social structure. Everyone is in the place they conquered. This is the perfect psychological preparation for the adult world. When you can't get a job, it's your fault for not qualifying enough. When your salary barely pays the bills, it's because you didn't study the right subjects. When you live stressed working 60 hours a week, it's because you didn't make the right choices when you were young. The system created the problems but transferred the responsibility to the individual. And the most brilliant part is that the victim themselves believes it. The meritocratic school creates a hierarchy that extends throughout life. The rich boy who got good grades becomes the executive who exploits the poor boy who got bad grades. And both believe this difference is fair, that it was earned through merit. There's no questioning that one had private tutors while the other was working to help at home. There's no mention that one had family connections while the other didn't even know certain opportunities existed. Starting inequality becomes ending inequality, but disguised as justice. And when you question this structure, when you point out that the game was rigged, you're accused of victimhood, of resentment, of wanting to take away the merit of those who won. The system taught everyone to defend their own prison. And while people fight among themselves, arguing about who deserves or doesn't deserve, the structure that created all this inequality continues untouched, producing the next generation of winners and losers before they even learn to read. Graduation day is celebrated as a milestone of freedom, the end of one stage and the beginning of another full of possibilities. Families get emotional, friends take photos, speeches talk about bright futures and doors that are opening. But the truth that nobody realizes in that moment of celebration is that there was no transition at all. The person simply changed buildings. They traded the school desk for the office desk, the bell that controlled their time for the time clock, the report card for the performance evaluation. The structure is identical, just with different names and higher stakes. That feeling of being trapped in a routine that doesn't make sense, of having to ask permission for basic needs, of competing with colleagues for crumbs of recognition, all of that continues. The difference is that now you call it a career. Think about the architecture of control that remains intact. At school, you had to arrive at a specific time, otherwise you'd be marked absent. At work, you clock in and any delay is deducted from your salary. At school, you had 15 minutes of break to breathe between one class and another. At work, you have the coffee break, calculated to the minute so you recharge just enough energy to keep producing. At school, you asked permission to go to the bathroom. At work, in many companies, your time away from your station is monitored. The control list received a technological upgrade, but the essence is the same. You don't control your time, someone controls it for you. And you accept this as natural because you spent 16 years being trained to accept exactly this. The hierarchy you learned to respect at school gets new faces in the corporate environment. The teacher becomes the manager, the principal becomes the CEO, the pedagogical coordination becomes the human resources department. And you continue being the subordinate, the one who receives orders and must execute them without questioning too much. Of course, now they use more sophisticated words. Instead of, do your homework, they say, deliver this report by Friday. Instead of, pay attention, they say, we need your engagement in this meeting. But the meaning behind it is the same. Your function is to obey, produce, and not create problems. That child who raised their hand to question why things were done was silenced a long time ago. Now you're an adult who accepts meaningless projects, who participates in useless meetings, who executes repetitive tasks, all without asking if there's a better way to do this or if that really needs to be done. The reward system is also frighteningly similar. At school, you competed with your classmates for grades, for the teacher's praise, and for that Best Student of the Month seal. At work, you compete for promotions, for salary increases, for public recognition in meetings. The dynamic is exactly the same. Limited resources distributed among many, creating a competition where few win and most lose. And just like at school, where you learned that your value was in your grades, at work you measure your value by salary and hierarchical position. Your self-esteem continues depending on external validation and on metrics defined by others. You've internalized this logic so deeply that you don't even notice how much it controls your life. You wake up thinking about whether you're performing well, go to sleep worried about whether you'll hit your target, live in constant anxiety about not being good enough according to standards you never chose. Corporate language is the same school language, just with a more professional veneer. Performance, goals, deadlines, deliveries, feedback, evaluation, development, and all these words you already knew before 18. School taught you the vocabulary of productivity, and work just expanded the dictionary. When you hear, "We need to improve your performance indicators," it's the same as hearing your grades need to go up. When they say, "Let's do a 360 evaluation," it's just a more sophisticated version of the class council that decided your fate at school. The fear you felt of repeating the year became the fear of being fired. The shame of getting a low grade became the shame of not hitting the target. Even the public humiliation rituals continue. Remember when the teacher read the grades out loud in front of everyone? Now it's the sales ranking posted on the board, or that email where they compare each department's productivity. And then something revealing happens. You spend years in this race, working 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Waking up early, coming home late, always running against time, always with the feeling of owing something to someone. You sacrifice health, relationships, hobbies, sleep, everything in the name of climbing the hierarchy, of earning a little more, of finally reaching a place where you can breathe. But that place never comes. The more you climb, the more the system demands. And one day you stop and realize you're living exactly like those tired adults you saw when you were a child. You became that person who works to pay bills that arrive every month, who anxiously waits for the weekend to recover energy and start over on Monday, who dreams of retirement as if it were the final liberation. And then comes the most painful revelation. You realize that all this started on that first day of school, that you were carefully prepared for this life, that each year at school was training to accept this reality without questioning. The system didn't fail you, it had absolute success. You're exactly the product it wanted to create. And now that you finally see the prison, you discover that the bars are inside your own mind. So my friend, now you know. You've seen how the machine works, how it molded you, how it continues controlling your life every day. And now comes the most important question of all. What are you going to do with this information? Are you going to pretend you didn't read any of this and go back to autopilot tomorrow morning? Or are you going to start making conscious decisions about the life you really want to live? Look, I'm not here promising it's going to be easy. I'm not going to sell you the illusion that you just need to wake up and everything magically resolves itself. The truth is the opposite. When you see the prison, the fight gets even harder because now you're conscious of it. You're going to have to make choices that most people don't have the courage to make. You're going to have to question things that everyone accepts. You're going to have to swim against the current while everyone tells you you're crazy. But you know what the difference is? You'll be fighting for your freedom, not for the system's approval. So I want you to reflect on some things. How many decisions you made in your life were really yours? How many times did you choose something because that's what was expected of you? How many opportunities did you let pass because you were afraid to go off the script they taught you to follow? And more importantly, how much more of your life are you going to hand over to a system that doesn't care about you? These aren't rhetorical questions, my friend. I want you to really think about this, because each day that passes without consciousness is a day you'll never get back. Now, if this content moved you, if something here made sense, I need to ask you something. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Why? Because what you saw today is just the beginning. There are much deeper layers about how the system works, about how to truly build wealth, about how to reprogram your mind to get out of the rat race. And I'm going to keep bringing this kind of content that few have the courage to talk about. Content that goes against everything you've been taught, but that will give you tools to transform your life. Take a look at the other videos on the channel too. There's content about wealth mindset, about how the financial system keeps you poor, about strategies that rich people use and that nobody teaches in school. Each video is another piece of the puzzle. The more you understand about how things really work, the greater your capacity to make decisions that take you where you want to go, not where they want you to go. So dive into this content, absorb this information, and start applying it in your life. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And you didn't get here to be entertained, you got here to wake up. My friend, before you go, I need to tell you something from the heart. I believe in you. I really do. Not because I know you personally, but because I know that if you got here, if you watched this entire video, it's because there's something inside you that refuses to accept a mediocre life. There's a flame that hasn't gone out yet, even after all the years of conditioning. Each of us carries our own battles. Some are fighting against debts that seem impossible to pay. Others are trapped in jobs that destroy the soul one day at a time. There are people here who grew up without any opportunity, who had to fight for every crumb since childhood. And there are people who apparently have everything, but live empty inside because they're following a script they never wanted. Whatever your battle is, I want you to know that it doesn't define your potential. Your challenges don't determine your ceiling. The truth is that we all have much more capacity than the system made us believe. You have abilities that were never developed because they didn't fit in the school curriculum. You have ideas that were never heard because you learned to stay quiet. You have potential that was suffocated, but it's still there, waiting to be awakened. And it's not selfish to want to develop this. Actually, when you improve your own life, when you reach your potential, you automatically contribute so that other people around you do the same. You become a living example that it's possible to exit the conditioning. But none of this happens by chance. It's not magic. It's not luck, and it's not destiny. The study, it's constant learning. It's being willing to unlearn everything you were taught and relearn the right way. That's why I invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. Watch the other videos. Absorb this knowledge. Because each concept you understand is one more tool in your toolbox. One more weapon in your fight for a better life. Reflect on this with care. Think about whether it's worth continuing on this journey of self-discovery and transformation. And if the answer is yes, I'll be here every week, bringing content that will help you see further, think deeper, and act with more consciousness. Because together, we build not just better lives for ourselves, but a better world for everyone. I'll see you in the next video, my friend. Until then, be well.